Hi everyone. Are you one of those students that thinks you understand an Inspector Calls quite well and you think you have a fairly good knowledge of the play, but when you write essays you just don't seem to be able to get up to the next grade, get an extra few marks? If you're one of those people, this video is for you. Keep watching. Let's jump straight in. So we're going to start off with a quick quiz, which I call a level up challenge. We have a class system here in Britain. Some people agree with it, some people don't, but it exists. We can't deny that. What are, though, the three levels in the British class system? Try and think from the bottom up to the top. We'll go through that at the end of the video. So my first tip for picking up more marks in your Inspector Calls essay in your forthcoming GCSE exams. Firstly, we need to look at the mark scheme because that can tell us how we're going to pick up more of these 40 marks available. There are as many marks, if you look at the bottom here, we're looking at question 7, there are as many marks for integrating relevant context as there are for understanding and showing a detailed understanding of the play. That does surprise some students. A lot of teachers, I was guilty of this myself in previous years, have taught that when you're writing say a peak paragraph, you just need to pop a little bit of context on the end of a paragraph and you've done your job in that paragraph. Not necessarily the case, especially if we look at the mark scheme here. So this is suggesting to us that half of our essay should be context. So if you look at the second bullet point on the slide there, we need to start understanding that writing about context for an Inspector Calls is more than just popping a sentence or so at the end of a paragraph. You should embed your understanding of context within your paragraph whilst you are explaining why Arthur is selfish and displays capitalistic attitudes. Number 2, so context then, if we look at it in a bit more detail, I'm going to give you a very good tip that normally you might not learn until you start studying A-level English, but there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't get a grasp of this for your GCSE. It will help you when you're writing about context. So try and think of context like a coin. It has two sides to it. Let me show you what I mean. So firstly, we have context as written, and secondly, we have context as received by the reader or by the audience in the case of a play. What does this mean then? Let's take a look. First bullet point there, context as written. What does that mean? That means factors that influence the writer. Okay, so that's particularly important in Priestley's case. As we know, he had actual experience of war. Whether an author came from a rich or poor family, we might think of Charles Dickens and the fact that his father was imprisoned when he was young. What are your family's political beliefs growing up? That may shape your attitudes and beliefs as a writer. Okay, so this is all contextual factors as written. What influenced the writer of that particular text and how does that manifest itself in their writing? Okay, that's one side of this coin there, it's one side of context. The other one, if you look at the bottom bullet point there, is context as received. So what factors influence the audience? Again, we can think of an Inspector Calls, can't we? Just having lived through the Second World War, and perhaps many members of the audience had lived through both World Wars, the war is just over. The play was released in 1945, the same year that World War II ended. And so the audience has returned to peacetime. It must have been an incredible relief after 6 years of war. And they're able to actually go to the theatre again and watch a play without fear of air raids, of fear of being bombed. So imagine what that would have felt like for the audience. There was a massive social weight of opinion that said that we need to look after people now after the war. We don't want another war. We want social equality. We want everyone that fought in the war to be treated equally in our society and looked after. So context as received would have been massively important for the audience when going to watch an Inspector Calls in 1945. Number 3, young Eva Smith. She has a lot of weight on her young shoulders. She carries a lot of symbolism for Priestley within the narrative of the play. Let's take a look. So yes, she's a symbol for the entire British working classes, but also on top of that, that's quite a big responsibility for Eva on her own in the play, isn't it? But also she represents all working women. Priestley's socialist perspective, of course, would have led him to write about the fact that women in 1912 were very much exploited, just simply due to their gender, and were paid less than men. So yes, if we look at this famous quotation, there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths, but Priestley wanted to show that plight of the working classes and working class women with very few employment rights, specifically through Eva's story. So she uses Eva really as a metaphor to represent the entire British working classes in the play. And Sheila, finally a little thought about Sheila. You may be aware of this, again, may not. Sheila and Eva are about the same age, and that is no accident. The difference between them is simply class. Sheila comes from an upper middle class family, which is aspiring to get even higher within the social hierarchy, whereas Eva is stuck at the bottom of this pyramid. She is very much working class. She doesn't have family to support her, and she becomes more and more untethered from society as the play goes on as a result. So we are probably meant, if we think again as context as received, we are probably meant as an audience to draw some class-related parallels between Sheila and Eva. Number 4, there is no definitive ending. We know this, but then think about why there is no definitive ending. So the mystery around the inspector's true identity, you've probably had this conversation in class. Who was the inspector? I've heard that he was Eva's father. I've heard that he is an avenging angel sent down by God, and lots of other explanations. But Priestley clearly wanted the audience of this play to form their own ideas about who the inspector actually was. Why? Well, here's my suggestion: because he wanted to provoke debate after the audience had left the theatre about the ending. Hopefully then that would have created discussion around the need for greater responsibility. No matter who we think the inspector was, everyone would agree that it was terrible what happened to Eva and what could have been done to avoid it. Number 5, last top exam tip for picking up more marks in your Inspectacles essay. This is detective fiction. Yes, we can say it's an example of detective fiction. There is a detective, there is a crime of sorts, and the detective wants to solve the crime. It's also a morality play, but it is not these things as we typically know them. So yes, we can talk about the deadly sins. We can link each of the deadly sins to one of the Burlings or to Gerald, as I've suggested there. That's a very useful exercise to do if you haven't done it before. So this is linked to moral values, clearly the narrative of the play. Yes, also detective fiction is present here, but the difference is normally in a detective fiction, the inspector or the policeman or the policewoman or whoever it is from the authorities goes around trying to eliminate people from their inquiries because they want to find the one guilty person. They want to find the murderer, assuming there is only one. That is not the case. Here, our inspector already knows who's guilty before he even rings the Burling's doorbell. He knows they are all partly responsible. So that is where this play departs from the normal generic conventions of detective fiction. And lastly, so what is the point of that again? How would you write about that in an essay? The point surely is to gradually reveal that the inspector knows they are all partly guilty through the narrative of the play. That is where the play becomes interesting for the audience, this voyage of discovery. Oh, well, Arthur's surely guilty. He never should have fired Eva. Ooh, but Gerald had something to do with Eva's suicide as well. So it's that gradual unpeeling, like the layers of an onion, if you like, of the main, of the Burlings and Gerald's responsibility that really drives the narrative of the play. So, level up challenge answers. You have there the 3 levels of the British class hierarchy, British class system. Sometimes the working class is also called the lower class. That's why some people think there are 4 levels to this pyramid. There are 3. The lower classes and the working classes are the same thing. The inspector, interestingly, is very much outside the class system. Priestley does not want him to be subject to class-related forces within the play. He is free from all of that. And we find this out very early on in Act 1, where Arthur tries to intimidate the inspector by saying that he plays golf with the inspector's boss regularly. The inspector simply replies, and the stage directions are revealing here, he says dryly, "I don't play golf." That's it. He's not playing this class game with Arthur. He's above all that. Yeah, Arthur is not going to be able to wriggle out of questioning just because of his contacts. So some revision exercises you might want to have a go at before you go and relax for the rest of the evening and take a well-earned break. Which 6 quotations are most essential to a play, or sorry, not to a play, to an essay about the inspector? If you're writing an essay about the inspector, which quotations must you absolutely use? Which ones would you have in your first paragraph because they're your real go-to quotations about the inspector? And then try and come up with 6. Try and remember them without checking the play if you can. That would be even better. And where you really want to get to before your exam is being able to remember at least 6 quotations per character, per theme, word perfectly without referring to the play. That's the promised land you're trying to get to in terms of your revision journey. Number 2, same thing, 6 quotations, but what about if we were writing about responsibility, the theme of social responsibility? And number 3, pick one of those 2. So imagine you're writing an essay about either the inspector or about responsibility. When interpreting this quotation, what relevant context, okay, would be most important? So pick a quotation that you would use in your essay about the inspector, for example. What context could we embed, could we include within our analysis of that quotation? And maybe try and write out a little practice paragraph. Remember, the best way to get better at writing essays is to practice writing essays. But you don't have to write whole essays. You can just do, little paragraphs and then slightly larger paragraphs. They only take 10 minutes or so, and you will really build up your ability, improve your ability to write effectively then. Okay, that's it. So make sure if you do write a little practice paragraph, you add it into your revision folder. When you come back to it, maybe in a month's time, if you've learned a lot more about the play, you may think, yeah, that's fine, that's okay, that paragraph, but I can see 2 things that I definitely should have said that I didn't say first time around. And you can add that in and improve your practice paragraph. So, quick summary. Number 1, the mark scheme at edXL. I will hopefully do a separate video on AQA for an inspector course, but at edXL there are equal marks for context and showing detailed knowledge of the play. Context is like a coin. It is context as written for the author of that text, and it is context as received for the reader or the audience of that text. Edith Smith, bless her, a lot of weight on those shoulders. She is a symbol of the entire British working classes and young working women who were obviously exploited in the workplace in 1912. There is no definitive ending, we understand that, but you want to investigate why Priestley wrote it that way. Why was that the case? And yes, this is detective fiction and a morality play, but there are significant differences, significant ways in which this play departs from those generic conventions. You can use those in your essay. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Just a couple of reminders, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you're finding these videos beneficial to your revision journey, please take a minute to subscribe. The videos take a long time to make, and I'm hoping that I can continue making them for you guys long into the future, but I do need your support in order to do that. So a little word about the revision process. You should hopefully now be revising definitely, and you should hopefully be building up a little bit each day. Start off small and then get into good habits, and then do a bit more on a regular basis. And finally, I am online tutoring this year also, so I can show you the tip of the iceberg with these videos, but if you want to go into more detail, you think you need additional support, please ask an adult to drop me a line. That's it. Look after yourselves. See you on the next video.